campus. Yay, we're going to be recording this so that if you or some of your colleagues want to go back, you'll be able to have this information at the ready. So we're really excited that all of you are here today. If you haven't already, please go ahead and introduce yourself. Just see lots more people coming through. Compton College, Gavilan College, also individuals that are coming from, all over the state. So really excited that each of you are here. And just in terms of like today's agenda, as we said, this is a two-part. It's today, and then it'll be on April 15th again from 10 to 11:30. But for today, we're going to be focusing on creating a common understanding, just sort of undocumented students overall and the context within the state. We'll be doing a detailed overview of the law. We're going to spend a little bit of time there, just like digging right in to make sure that we're all on the same page when we're thinking about what the actual law written says. We'll take a quick break in that moment, just, bio break, get some water, and then we're going to come back and do some common challenges and case studies. We want to talk to you quickly. There are some statewide efforts going on around equitable implementation of AB 540 and SB 68. And then I'm not sure if you guys have heard about some of the legislative efforts around updating AB 540. So we'll talk to you about that as too. And then there's going to be a quick evaluation just at the end of today to make sure that we're on point, that we're hitting all the things that you want us to hit. We did try to look at the questions that you posed when you registered for today, and then we'll just do a quick closing and next steps. So really excited to be here with my amazing co-host, and she'll introduce herself in a minute. I also want to give out a shout out to Uni Park, who is our amazing behind the scenes technology person who's doing this work. So definitely giving some love to Uni for all of that she's up to and making sure that everybody can actually participate today effectively. And then I'm going to just say a little bit about myself. So I've been chattering on. I'm not sure if you know me. My name is Nancy Jeditis, and I am the Director of Higher Education at Immigrants Rising. I've been with about Immigrants Rising, as an organization for about 10 years, but I've been full-time on staff now for about 5. And I work really to conduct trainings that increase institutional support and equity, really elevating promising practices at different colleges and universities to try to create a safer and more accessible campus climate. I've been doing a lot of research around in-state tuition in the California DREAM Act, and I create a lot of resources. But I come to this work as a former financial aid counselor, as a pre-admissions advisor, and I've had the ability to be able to meet a lot of you from across the state and try to get a bigger and a broader statewide view of how we can better support undocumented students. But I'm so excited to be here with my co-host, and she's going to introduce herself now. Go ahead, Maria.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Always a pleasure working with you. Hi, everybody. My name is Maria Gutierrez, she, her, ella pronouns. I am the Dream Center coordinator and counselor at Chabot College. So in my position, I'm actually able to also not only talk to students about AB 540 and be a resource to them as a coordinator, but I work 50% with admissions and records. So I'm also processing AB 540s and residency reclassifications. And I've had just different positions throughout my journey in higher ed. So just super thankful to be here. And we can go on to the next slide.
Can you see the slide, Maria?
Yes, lamented.com.
Yeah. So we're asking people to go ahead and do this pre-assessment just to kind of measure sort of where you're at now and then where you're at later. So we're going to ask everybody to go to menti.com using code 39898354. So that's 39898354. Uni's going to check that into the chat. Thanks so much, Uni. And then I will, we're asking everyone to just go ahead and fill out the answers to these questions of, do you have a clear understanding of the requirements? Do you already have strategies to ensure students are aware of the necessary steps? And are you confident in resolving discrepancies in the interpretation of AB 540? So please go ahead and jump over there to menti.com, and I'm going to bring that responses up right now. Yikes, a little bit of trouble doing that. But please go ahead and just fill that out if you could. So this is exciting. We can see that, you know, so far about 30 people have answered. That's about half of where we're at with that. So, you know, kind of midpoint, right? Like people have, you know, like the more than half people have a clear understanding of AB 540 and SB 68. And then about half, a little bit, you know, in the middle there, kind of like students who have, individuals have strategies to ensure that students are aware of the necessary steps. Because it's one thing to have an understanding ourselves, how do we make sure that students are aware of the necessary steps? And then just a little bit lower on that in terms of confident in resolving discrepancies in the interpretation of AB 540. And I think that that is definitely, you know, that's something that I've seen in multiple places across the state, that sometimes some discrepancies are easy to resolve, others it's harder. And some of that I think also is based on positionality. So in terms of looking at who's here, I do see that we have a number of admissions people in the house. So I'm super excited to see that. Also, a lot of undocumented student support personnel here, some individuals from some other outside organizations as well. So I think that based on our positionality, that's going to determine, you know, how easy or difficult it might be to be able to support, you know, resolve discrepancies and implement strategies. But we're going to be sharing lots of information with you today and next week to try to see if we can push the needle on the dial a little bit more for each of those. So thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you so much for that, Nancy. So up next, we're going to talk about creating a common understanding between all of us. And we'll go ahead and start with defining what it means to be undocumented. So how does a person end up here, or did they come here without, like for example, they entered without inspection to the US, maybe they entered with a legal status but overstayed. So for example, maybe they came in with a visa, it expired, so now they are undocumented. Some undocumented folks might have DACA, which is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and it has employment authorization status and protection from deportation 2 years in a row, and it has to be renewed every 2 years. Some of them are currently in the process of legalizing their status, so they might be in that limbo where they're waiting to hear back. And then definitely it creates vulnerable positions for immigrants who are currently undocumented in the US.
Maria?
Okay, so there are undocumented high school seniors graduating every year. From 2019, we have heard that there are 98 students graduating every year. This is high school students nationwide. And it's thought that 65,000 for 17 years. And as we see them they're coming from high school, we're seeing that they don't have access to DACA because of the guidelines that are so strict. And it's also important to highlight that almost 1/3 live in California. So that's why AB 540 is so important, to be able to know this information to better guide them. So when we're talking about the undocumented population in California, the numbers are definitely going up, right? So in California, there are a lot of undocumented students that we are serving. And this is information from fall 2019. From the ages of 16 to 24, we see that we have 402,000, and currently enrolled in college, there are 92,000 undocumented students. And only 21.6% of college age undocumented youth are attending California college. So definitely we want to see that number go up, because 21% is such a low number. So even just talking about AB 540 and having that as access to college could definitely impact that percentage that we're looking at.
in terms of thinking about the diversity, we always try to ground ourselves in this importance, recognizing that not all undocumented students are coming from a specific area of the world. If you listen to the news, you would think that individuals are only coming from Mexico or Central or South America, but this study, which was done in 2015 in UCLA, and is still, the numbers still bear out today, is that individuals are coming from Africa, from Asia, from Southeast Asia, from Europe. Individuals are actually coming from all over the world. So it's really important that when we're speaking to prospective students and current students, that we're not just kind of talking to one portion of the room, that we're making sure that this information is available to everyone. And one great way to do that is making sure that our information is on our websites, that we offer this freely information so that people don't have to out themselves and come out to us. Really important for us to be thinking about. And in that, you can actually just take a look at this study that was done in 2018 from the Census Bureau, just in terms of thinking about undocumented students. It's about half of all undocumented students are Hispanic, but there's a large Asian and Asian Pacific Islander, a strong Black population, white population, and others in terms of the race of undocumented students. But then it also is really important to be thinking about that the DACA eligible students does not match that, right? There's lots more students who are Hispanic in terms of from the Census Bureau, lower numbers of Black and API individuals have actually been eligible for DACA, back when people could apply. But just thinking about this, we really want to make sure that we are elevating this. And actually, perhaps you received an email from me yesterday announcing the resource guide that we're going to be promoting on April 19th around effectively supporting undocumented Black students. We also have a resource around effectively supporting Asian and Asian Pacific Islander students. So making sure that we are inclusive of all undocumented students and helping them get through school. Another area that we think is really important in the diversity is recognizing the multiple ways in which individuals actually arrive at higher education. Some of that is, when AB 540 was brought into play, the first time it was really just around young individuals who are in high school, who'd been here for 3 years in high school, graduated from a California high school. But now, we recognize that that is not the full picture of who our student population is. So individuals starting at a high school, maybe starting at adult school, going to non-credit classes, making their way to community college, sometimes going back to adult school, right? Like it can be a little bit of a circle prior to actually making their way to the four-year university. Some go directly from high school, but some have kind of taken a little bit more of a less direct route. And then also thinking about how are undocumented students actually making their way into graduate school or professional programs. So there are multiple pathways to college, and SB 68 has actually increased those opportunities for individuals to find their way from adult school or non-credit or high school and community college. But if we're not able to equitably implement or students who are in adult schools and non-credit classes don't know about that, then we're not keeping the door open for all of those who are intended to be supported by this bill. I do see a question in the chat in terms of, does anybody know when an individual who overstayed a non-immigrant visa is considered undocumented for AB 540 purposes as opposed to out of status? Or to clarify, out of status, versus, I'm sorry, I just lost that question. Let me start with the first part, which is really just talking about individuals who are out of status and individuals who have their visa. So this is kind of going back to the slide that Maria was talking about in terms of who is considered undocumented. So individuals who actually are here with a visa, and it's a longer period of time visa, like you might have a visa for 10 years, a tourist visa for 10 years, but your length of stay is for a period of time. My understanding is that once the length of stay is overstayed, a student would be considered, in most instances, undocumented at that point to have fallen out of status. Some schools I've been worked with have actually said that when they look at the visa in the passport and the visa is for 10 years, then they're not allowing students to be considered AB 540 because they still have the visa. But our legal interpretation of that, and we've checked with different legal professionals, is that once you have actually overstayed that length of stay period, that individuals would then be considered undocumented. And if they had met the eligibility for AB 540 at that time, although there'd be lots of detrimental effects towards being undocumented, should be able to be considered for AB 540. Maria, that's your understanding as well?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. So I hope that answered your question. And then we'll just continue on now with this detailed overview of in-state tuition. Great. So in terms of AB 540, AB 2000, and SB 68, this is something that has built over time. And so AB 540 passed in 2011. Some of you might have participated in our 20-year anniversary, which just took place in October, 20 years of AB 540 being in place. That was expanded in 2014, and that allowed individuals who had actually perhaps graduated early, right? They had graduated high school, but had 3 years worth of high school credits, but did not have 3 years of attendance, to be able to actually use some of their elementary or middle school classes to come with them. That's AB 2000. And then in 2017, SB 68 passed, and that's what actually allowed those the opportunity to be expanded to what we know it is to be today. So SB 68 allowed adult schools and community college students to be included in the attendance and educational requirements, and it expanded associate's degree or minimum transfer requirements to the degree requirements. If you look at the red, must attend 3 years full-time at a California high school, that was AB 540, must graduate from a California high school or obtain a GED or a CHESP. That was the original. The blue part is AB 2000, which I was just talking about, 3 years of high school credits and 3 years of full-time at elementary or secondary school. But the reason this is purple is because you had to have actually graduated from a California high school to meet the eligibility for AB 2000. SB 68 has actually expanded this even more. So it's 3 years of full-time at a California high school, an adult school, or a California community college using credit or non-credit classes. And it still includes, and you have to graduate from a California high school, obtain a GED or CHESP, and you could also use your associate's degree or minimum transfer requirements to a CSU or a UC. So it expanded it to adult schools and community colleges. And it still kept in that caveat for AB 2000, so that if you hurried up and graduated early, maybe you and you had other time at elementary or secondary schools, you'd be able to pull those in. We have a great guide, which is this quick guide to SB 68, which it'd be helpful to, kind of like pulls the pieces together to allow you to see what those specific requirements are in each area. In terms of part 1 is really about the attendance requirements, throwing in the part down here about AB 2000, and then talking about what the degree and completion requirements are. I think the thing that's also helpful about this quick guide is down here, it talks about which high schools count and which adult schools count. So California high schools must be established by the State Board of Education. So it's only high schools that are established or sort of otorgado from the State Board of Education. California adult schools can actually be established by a county office of education, the unified school district or the high school district, or the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. So high school or adult school programs that are actually in a rehabilitation or corrections programs could also count as well. So these are important for us to know. Because sometimes we're like, could it be this school? Could it be that school? So it's really only if it meets those specific qualifications. And then if it's a California community college program, either credit classes or non-credit classes.
And then in the chat, they're asking for the form. And while they put it in the chat, I'll go ahead and just talk about what is considered full-time. So there's this really nice chart that I always like to reference, not only for myself, but for students. Like what is a year of attendance or 3 years of attendance? So when we're looking at a high school, we're looking at 55 credits for 1 year. Adult school for 120 hours. Community colleges, which has a cap of 2 years of attendance, would be either 24 semester credit units or 36 quarter credit units. For community college non-credit courses, we're looking at 420 classroom hours, and these could kind of be mixed and matched. So I always explain that to students. For example, if they're not eligible for it yet, it's really important to let them know, like, you're not eligible yet, but you could be eligible for it by these different forms of attaining full-time attendance in it. So when we're looking at the 3-year full-time attendance, if you have a high school transcript, then you could see that those credits that were earned. Same thing with adult school. If they do have that attendance form where it has all of their hours, you're able to calculate this with the student. Sometimes they might want to attend community college and be able to pay maybe non-resident fees for their first semester or the first year, and they could do it this way as well. And then looking at community college hours, which are a lot of hours, but we have had students that have also became eligible this way. We also have a great guide, calculating your eligibility guide from Immigrants Rising, which is amazing. So this chart just kind of makes it easier to digest the information, especially when explaining it to students.
Yeah. And one thing that we wanted to point out really is that as the law stands right now, students can only count up to 2 years of credit classes at a California community college. That means the remaining year must come from high school, adult school, non-credit classes at the community college. This is important because we know there's a lot of students who can actually start right away at a community college. And then they could have up to 3 years, 4 years. I work with students who had 5 or 6 years of community college classes. But unless they've actually got a year of high school or a year of adult school or non-credit classes at the community college, they're not going to be able to meet those 3 years of full-time attendance. This especially comes into play. I know there's some colleges that actually have they have credit classes, which are ESL classes, or building math and English classes, or maybe prior to SB 705 they did, but they have classes that are actually counted as credit classes, but non-degree applicable. And even if students are taking non-degree applicable courses, but they're considered credit courses, they bump up against that 2-year maximum. So I think it's really important then that when we're talking to students that we are clear about, if they're coming straight into community college, that we might want to talk about other options that they could go forward with, to be able to sort of like maybe take some adult school classes on the side or take some non-credit classes on the side so that they could work towards that end. I saw Matthew asking a question of like why that 2-year barrier.
Good, how are you?
And understanding that, my best knowledge about that is that individuals were actually, this law was built sort of with that mindset, like I was saying before, about people who are coming from community college, coming from high school into community college. So they probably like, oh, you've already done a year or 2 at high school, you'd only need 1 more, 2, like up to 2 years at a community college. That's one reason. The second reason that I understand it is that individuals are actually, the second reason that I understand it is that they didn't want students to be staying, like the idea that students could just kind of bounce after 2 years at a community college, which unfortunately doesn't reflect the majority of the community college students that I have been able to work with, but that they're sort of not wanting to make it look like you would be staying at community college beyond the 2+2. Maria, would you add anything to that? Or Matt, did you have any other ideas around that?
No, I was actually just been a point of curiosity for me for a while. And so I was curious what your thoughts are. The reasons still seem very foggy, but yeah.
Yeah, right. And I think that we'll be talking later in the program about, we'll be talking later in today about how individuals, there's a new law in place that's actually trying to get rid of this 2-year maximum for community colleges. And this is something that I felt has been really important for a long time, because I have worked with a couple of those students, they had 2 or 3, like they had one student had 9 years that they've been taking part-time at the community college, another had 6 years. They were ready to transfer. They brought their information to the CSU and they were denied access because they bumped up against that 2-year maximum. So they then had to kind of go sideways and or backwards to take a year of non-credit or adult school classes. And then think about how they'd be able to move forward and bring those. So they kind of like were going on pause. So instead of helping them build that trajectory with strength, they were sort of had to go around the way. I think the other thing that's really important to be considering is how hard it is for students to actually be able to get 420 hours at a community non-credit course or at adult school. This, it's the number seems somewhat arbitrary in terms of how they came up with 420 hours, like it would sort of be the equivalent of 1 year of high school. But if we're considering a lot of our adult school students and a lot of our students who are taking non-credit are doing many other things at the same time, I know it's also important that we try to advocate for a change for a reduction of those hours or equivalency in that way.
Yeah, and then there is another question. Can students accelerate the 3 years if they take more units per semester, for example, 18 units at a community college in addition to adult school? Yeah, they definitely can. So there's even been cases where like the 420 hours don't have to be taken within the 1 year. So there's students that have actually taken them like within one semester of just adult school. Sometimes there is that combination that they're taking 2 of them. So yeah, it doesn't matter in terms of academic year, how fast or how long it takes them, as long as they meet those hour or credit requirements. You just have to note that if they are taking those community college classes, they would be probably paying non-resident fees unless they're doing some type of concurrent enrollment with the adult school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm wondering, since we have some individuals on here from adult school and or from the non-credit classes, I'm wondering what kind of comments you might like to bring in terms of the importance for trying to reduce the hours for non-credit or adult school. If anybody would like to add something on that point. Okay. Having a hard time managing the chat, as you can see, while I'm also trying to speak with you. So I do think one thing that I would just add to what Maria said around that, around accelerating that, especially if they're going to be taking adult school while they're taking credit classes, is that the colleges have often, some of the colleges that I've worked with have been very specific about how you cannot repeat individual classes. So if you're taking college level English and then you want to take non-credit classes that are English classes, then they have to sort of be at the same level. You can't be kind of like going back and sort of just getting the hours to be able to take advantage of the AB 540 or SB 68 rule. I think it's also important that there are some non-credit classes that are just sort of like professional development or other areas like computer classes or other areas that could be for personal growth. And so I encourage students that when they are taking those non-credit classes or adult school classes, that they are not duplicating their efforts. Duplicating classes that they've taken, because that could create a concern when the transcripts are actually evaluated moving forward or the attendance records are moving forward. So those are just important things to consider as we're helping students.
And then there's another comment. At a California community college, if students enroll in a maximum of 6 units, they get charged in-state tuition fees. I forgot what ed code that is. I don't know if you know it, Nancy. It's not at every community college. Some colleges do have it, but it has to be approved by the board within that district. So some of them do have it, but it's not implemented as a blanket for all of California community colleges.
Yeah, that code is called Ed Code 76140. It's in the California Educational Code, but as Maria said, it does need to be approved by the board. I think one thing that's really good right now, though, with some of this virtual offerings in this past couple of years, is that I know students who have been able to work with some of the schools that have implemented that. I know Hartnell college has that implemented. I believe Miracosta is working on it or having that implemented. I think Miracosta is here today. You could let us know. And if somebody's here from Hartnell, anybody who actually has implemented 76140, that is a great way to help students be able to get some of those community college credits at resident fees. There's also an opportunity for students to be able to get class resident fees if they're taking adult school classes through another educational code, which is SB 554, which allows students to enroll in adult school classes and then be able to take those credit classes without paying the non-resident fees. So thank you, Matthew. He just put the 76140 ed code in there. And yes, Rocio, it's too bad that not all colleges are able to participate. You're fortunate that you are able to offer that at Gavilan. Would you be willing to just jump in for a minute and tell us about how that took place and what the process was towards getting that implemented?
I'm actually from the financial aid office, so I'm not familiar with how this got implemented. That's definitely more of the role of our admissions and records folks. So I'm not familiar with how this came to happen, but I know that we've been participating in quite a few years. So I'm just happy that we are able to provide this service to our students.
Well, that's great. Yeah, thank you. I mean, I do think it's really helpful, and we are actually working at Immigrants Rising to try to conduct a study of which schools now actually have 76140 and try to be able to put together a toolkit that would allow other campuses to be able to build on the work that has taken place to make this possible across the state. Any other schools that are here that are participating in that program? I do think these are important lessons that we can help elevate to each other. Okay, great. Well, we'll just continue on. And we can try to provide some more detailed information on that on our next session in terms of SB 554 and 76140 so that you can get the information that you need. And Matthew Morin from Chaffey College, they've been a leader on SB 554, has actually put the bill in there also that allows individuals who are at adult schools to be able to, as long as they can stay in high school in their adult school program, can actually take some credit classes at the California Community College without having to pay resident fees. And I think in some schools, they've actually been able to make it possible that they don't pay any fees. They're just building their educational knowledge as well as their credits and units they could use towards transferring in as in-state tuition in a future time.
So when we're looking at fees, this is an average tuition and fees for California community colleges, CSUs, UCs, and we kind of see that overview of what is considered a California resident, what would be charged for 12 units per semester, which includes AB 540, AB 2000, or SB 68. They do have to have submitted the AB 540 in order to be considered non-resident fees. So we see that the difference is huge when we look at the additional fees that non-resident, undocumented, or international students or students that might be eligible for AB 540 but have not yet submitted one are being charged. So the difference is just monumental. And on top of that, having an AB 540 affidavit on file allows undocumented students to be able to apply for the California DREAM Act. Versus if they don't have that AB 540 eligibility, even if they do the California DREAM Act, those funds do not get dispersed to them. So at California Community College, paying about $704 for full-time status 12 units versus the 4,000 plus. At a CSU, 3,684 in comparison to 7,828. And at a UC, we're looking at 7,034 versus the 21,872. So this is just a huge difference in terms of cost. We also see that we've seen that a lot of the students actually end up going to California Community College just because of the fees. So this definitely plays an impact, especially as students are graduating high school and they might be realizing that they are undocumented, they're getting these acceptance letters. an email and then followed by an email like, well, actually, you're non-resident. So for some students, this is how they're figuring out that being undocumented means having to pay more fees in college. So just wanted to highlight that average tuition fees and what big of a difference it is for students.
Yeah, so true, Maria. And I think one thing that you said that struck me so much is having the affidavit on file, and actually having it approved by the admissions office, right? Like students think like, well, I told them on my application that I had 3 years of high school. I submitted my transcripts, especially if they're going to a 4-year, and not all schools are actually forthcoming and saying like, here's the affidavit that you need to submit, and you need to submit them with your transcripts. So that's really important. Also, students that are going to those 4-year universities, or you switch from one school to another, have to actually create another affidavit, get that their transcripts again submitted. Sometimes even within the same district, they need to actually submit a new affidavit and have it approved. And what we're also trying to see is how can we make more obvious to students that they need to submit the affidavit, that the affidavit has actually been received, and any outstanding information that would still be needed. So it's a really big difference between just kind of being like, yes, I meet AB 540 eligibility, until the student actually, the school classifies you as AB 540. So those are really important to consider. And these numbers are actually like $704 plus $4,000. So it'd be like $5,000 there per semester, right? At the UC, it's almost like $30,000 per semester if you don't have AB 540. And like Maria was saying, you can then no longer be able to receive state-based financial aid. And some schools actually don't allow students to be able to receive scholarships, even if they're considered residents. If they don't meet the eligibility for AB 540, then they're charged out of state tuition and have to have those additional burden of not being able to receive state-based financial aid. So we know that was a lot of information. We're wondering if anybody has any specific questions about those areas, before we go on to the next section. Seems like this is all kind of good, clear information for people that you're doing really well around that. Okay, great. We are going to just take a quick, I wanted to just share this slide, I think, which was so important in terms of talking about some of the impact of AB 540. Irma is an amazing young woman, mother of a couple of children, returned back to, she had her own degree in her home country, but she's currently at a continuing education school. And when asked about AB 540, she said, AB 540 / SB 68, I think she probably just said AB 540, has given me hope. I didn't know there were resources for an undocumented person like me. Being able to speak with a trained and trusted counselor made all the difference in the world. Because this counselor knew about AB 540 and its benefits, I was able to move forward. Now I want to help others to do the same. So I think that this is such an impactful quote because it's the trusted individual that she was able to speak with at a continuing education school that's actually going to allow her to work on the hours that she needs to be able to then transfer into a community college and be able to continue supporting others in that path. So really exciting to, I'm sure all of you actually have examples of students for whom this impact has been really dramatic. So we're going to just take a quick break. If everybody could come back in 5 minutes, just a quick bio break, grab some water, run to the restroom if you need to, and we'll be staying here if you have any specific questions that you'd like to ask right now. So we'll be seeing you soon.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
Hi, this is Esther over at Delta College. I just have a question. If by any chance you have any information either on the website or just off the top of your head about the program, the D6 program, which is a California Dream Act incentive program that just came out of the commission's student commission aid students. Would you happen to have any information aside from what they have? The reason I ask is because I'm having a bit of trouble on my campus, on my end, because So the student is able to volunteer hours, and then at the end of each semester, well, in an academic year, they're able to secure up to $3,000, being split $1,500 per semester. The issue I'm coming across is my campus has to go through HR, and so we have to do a TB clearance, a live scan clearance, and so I'm trying to find a loophole as to the company that my school goes through. The company doesn't accept individuals without social security numbers to get their
So-
live scans.
Yeah, well, we do not have any information ourselves independently, but I do know that the California Undocumented Higher Education Coalition is working on developing a worksheet that can help individuals know where they could be able to get a background check without having a social security number. So I think that part of it is working directly with your department, like with your school, to try to get HR to get a better understanding of like why this is needed specifically at your school. Would they be willing to accept a background check from another organization that's sort of like an accredited background check? And then trying to work with them independently to sort of see how you'd be able to get them to allow an individual to volunteer if they're going to be volunteering at San Joaquin Delta. Another option seems like it would be for students to be able to do volunteer work in their community, not doing it directly at San Joaquin Delta, but still being able to take advantage of the program while you're sorting these pieces out.
Yes, and that's what I'm currently looking at, so that the student can ultimately find something off campus somewhere near, specifically my student, because she doesn't drive. But I'm currently working with another student who we're looking into finding, as a nursing student, finding a clinic that is willing to accept a student for volunteer or community services.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so I would definitely reach out to Marisela from the Foundation of Community Colleges. I know that she is working with the coalition around that document to kind of get some progress on its update. But I also think that I know that there are multiple places where students can get a background check without a social security number, and maybe connecting with pre-health dreamers to talk about how a student would be able to get connected to do volunteer service, because they work with a lot of undocumented individuals who are going into nursing, medical school, dentistry, and physical therapy.
Awesome. Okay, I will definitely reach out to the dreamers. Did you say the P? Oh, I just lost my train.
Let's do it by email, okay? Just I want to
Okay.
give, in case anybody else has any other questions. But I can, if you send me an email, I can send you the information around pre-health dreamers, or throw it into the chat when Maria's speaking.
Thank you.
Alrighty, and if we could start getting folks to come back. All right, so up next, we're going to talk about some common challenges. And we wanted to do it through case studies, because we know that a lot of us have actually encountered some of these students in our day-to-day lives when we're helping students. So we're going to go ahead and present the cases, and then we're going to follow it up with an activity for us to complete together.
And you can just see here, like, here is that student at the 2-year, like, wait, I want to get to the 4-year college, right? Like, am I ever going to be able to make my way there? Or even students who are at ESL being like, how am I going to make my way to the 2-year? So I'm really excited to see what Maria's going to bring.
So we have case study 1. We have Madison, who arrived at your school for her junior year from the Philippines and was able to bring in courses from her home country. During her senior year, Madison decided to attend a 4-year university. However, although she would get her high school diploma, she would not be eligible for AB 540. And we're going to go ahead and go into the next case study. We'll just present them and we'll follow up with a Jamboard and have a discussion about them. So case study number 2. Nee arrived to you letting you know she is ready to transfer. She has completed 50 units at your California Community College after arriving to the United States of America, but did not attend high school or adult school in California. Nee is worried about the cost of attendance and wants to know what her options are. Nee received her California issued GED in 2019. So the question on this one would be, what advice would you give her? And we'll go into case study number 3. Rodrigo, a 31-year-old student, is currently attending a California adult school to pursue his GED. He wants to attend college and is fascinated by business and would like to ultimately obtain his BA in business administration. He comes to you and lets you know he heard undocumented students can attend college and there is a way to pay less. How would you inform him of his options? So Rodrigo currently has 420 hours at the California Adult School. So for this one, we would be answering what are Rodrigo's options. So I'm going to go ahead and put the Jamboard link here. And we know that there's definitely different styles when it comes to talking to students, but just answering those questions.
Should we maybe do one at a time, Maria, instead of like all at the same time? Do you want to just start with this one with Rodrigo?
Yeah, definitely.
I just wonder, like, if we put them all on there at the same time, it's going to be hard to distinguish.
Yes, definitely. So there is the Jamboard link on the chat, and the case studies are also in the Jamboard.
Oh, they are? Okay, great.
And then we could definitely check in and we'll go through them one by one. So feel free to include anything you would talk to the student about, utilizing the sticky notes.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with a Jamboard, you just grab the sticky note. Can you see the sticky note here, Maria? So you just grab it here on the side and write. So just kind of like, what would you do? How would you form Rodrigo of his options? Or then also just kind of going back to, you know, the knee and Madison in terms of coming from the Philippines. Madison's story, yes, each of those are, I can, while people are filling that out, I can just make sure that we are case study 1. Madison arrived at your school for her junior year from the Philippines and was able to bring in courses from her home country. And then during her senior year, she had attended a 4-year university, but she just got here in junior year. So she would have her high school diploma, but she wouldn't be eligible for AB 540. So these stories are also on the Jamboard. So if you just go straight to the Jamboard, you can actually look at those stories. The case studies are also on the Jamboard. So we want to just hear from individuals sort of like, what's the policy at your school? What advice would you have for Madison, as well as for Nee, as well as for Rodrigo? And so we want to do this just because instead of us just sort of telling you what we think these answers are, we'd love to just engage with you more about learning about your policies and seeing different individuals' and responses to this. So please go ahead and just fill those out.
And then I see folks adding their sticky notes. So thank you all for that.
We'll give people maybe, another 5 minutes or more to just kind of think about some of these areas. Kind of see how we're doing on other pieces as well. So we're starting with Madison.
Yeah, folks also have commented on Rodrigo's options too. And I see folks are also writing on the second scenario as well and the third one. So I'll go ahead and just review the second one. So Nee arrived to you letting you know she's ready to transfer. She has completed 50 units at your California Community College after arriving to the United States of America, but did not attend high school or adult school in California. Nee is worried about the cost of attendance and wants to know what her options are. Nee received her California issued GED in 2019. What advice would you give her? And then Nancy, would we want to kind of stop there and review them together now, just for time?
We have time. I just kind of worried how people are navigating all three of them at the same time.
Got it, okay.
But as long as everyone's just going ahead and answering these different areas, I think that will be really helpful.
Okay. And then I see folks adding on the third one as well. So I'll go ahead and just reread that one. Rodrigo, a 31-year-old student, is currently attending a California adult school to pursue his GED. He wants to attend college. He is fascinated by business and would like to ultimately obtain his BA in business administration. He comes to you and lets you know he heard undocumented students can attend college and there is a way to quote unquote pay less. How would you inform him of his options? And Rodrigo currently has 420 hours at the California adult school. So what would be Rodrigo's options? And then we know that depending on your work setting, you might feel more comfortable with some of these scenarios or case studies over the other. So wanted to give you all that working time so you could divide it up in whatever order feels kind of natural to you.
So maybe just give people about 2 or 3 more minutes to finish writing out their options on each one of the individual 3s that you feel most comfortable writing on. And then we can start back doing some of the debrief. Does that sound good to everyone? If you want more time, let us know.
Yes, how are we feeling? Then feel free to unmute or put it in the chat. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and kind of debrief together, and we'll start with the first scenario. I'll give everybody a moment to kind of come back to the working space. And we'll start with Madison. So Madison arrived at your school during her junior year from the Philippines and was able to bring in courses from her home country. During her senior year, Madison decided to attend a 4-year university. However, although she would get her high school diploma, she would still not be eligible for AB 540. So would anybody like to read the sticky note that they wrote here? And feel free to unmute yourself. We have some good answers. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
So I'm looking for my note. Okay, so I'm not a high school counselor, but this is what I wrote. I'm not sure if it's right, but I would explain to the student that, financial aid eligibility options that she has in her situation, and explain the difference in tuition fees between, students that meet the AB 540 requirements and those that don't. I don't know if that's all
Yeah,
that
that's a good start.
shows, but I think I had written more, and just encourage the student to, thought I had written more, but encourage the student to hopefully meet that AB 540 unless she can, afford the tuition for someone that doesn't meet the AB 540 status, to go straight to a four-year college, by encouraging her to consider community college courses or adult school. I'm sorry, I thought I had written more, but I think it got cut off.
I think it
Yeah.
only lets you write a certain amount, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, it really looked like you were even talking about adult school, eventually like as another pathway, or even going straight into community college and paying non-resident fees. So yeah, she found out during her senior year. So what are her options at then and there? So definitely taking into account how many credits are completed at the California high school, and what would be the pathway, how many more would she need? So definitely we could reference back that chart that we were looking at with the hours and the credits in order for her to become eligible. And then Nancy, would you like to add anything?
Oh, that's good. I see we have a question. Someone's raised their hand, I think, or is that still Julio?
Oh no, I think he unraised it.
Oh, that might be mine. I'm piggybacking off of Julio. Julio, I think we did get cut off because I know I wrote more. So I think we did get cut off. But I think following what Julio said is, I had written down that the policy at our school is the requirement is 3 years, of course, and that I would recommend her to look into adult school to complete her timeline. But also, at least in our college, we have what is called college early start, where if the student attends college, adult school, they can also attend Delta College and take courses. So they would be enrolled, that would be the difficulty part, right? Where they're enrolled in both colleges, but start off her college credits at that point, and then completing her timeline at an adult school, and then transfer over.
Yes, definitely. That is definitely another option. So there are some colleges that have implemented those kind of programs. I've also heard high schools letting them stay as a fifth year. So yeah, those are all definitely options that the student would have, and letting them make that decision as well. Thank you so much for sharing, Esther.
And there's a question, Esther, is that college early start program a dual enrollment program?
Yes and no. The reason we don't call it dual enrollment is because we actually have a dual enrollment program and college early start, where dual enrollment is primarily catered to high school students, and the college early start program is catered more towards adult schools. So the only difference is that dual enrollment limits the amount of classes that they can take as far as subject, which ones to take. And some of these classes are actually offered at their high schools. Whereas as a college early start program, they could take an array, everything that they want, as so long as they meet the prerequisites for each class.
Okay, great.
Thank you. And then we'll go on to the next slide.
Well, I just would want to just throw in there too, before the next slide, just talking about people are talking about these other options, right? About enrolling in adult schools, non-credit classes, like some people talking about that 76-140 option. If you did have the ability to be able to take those 6 units per term, that would take them a while to be able to get up to those 24 units. And then I like this person about just, someone was saying to just really congratulate them for where they are and understanding about some of the alternatives. So yeah, just wanted to highlight some of those too. So then going to the next slide, like you said.
So up next, Nia arrived to you, letting you know she is ready to transfer. She has completed 50 units at your California Community College after arriving to the US, but she did not attend high school or adult school in California. He's worried about the cost of attendance and wants to know what her options are. Nee received her California issued GED in 2019. And if anybody would like to highlight the sticky note that they did, on what advice would you give her? Please feel free to.
You heard one like that. Mike, go that for me.
I appreciate it.
Please mute yourselves if you're not muted. Karen, did you want to share?
No.
Want to just give an overview maybe?
Yeah, of course. So I'll highlight some of these sticky notes. She can qualify for AB 540 when she completes the remaining hours at an adult school. So she could get the equivalent of 3 years needed before she transfers. Students are limited to years full-time at a community college. So the student would need 1 year of California schooling, which could be met through 1 year of non-credit coursework or non-credit at an adult school. Congratulate her on reaching this milestone, once again, humanizing that experience, and let her know I would connect her with another colleague to research more options. Yeah, so this is really great. You know, if you don't have the answer, saying, I don't know it, but I'll help you find someone who does. Let's find out together. I would explain the process of AB 540 and how only 2 years would count towards this, and encourage her to consider adult school. I definitely ask more questions, but would definitely advise her to stay at a community college since it would be cheaper. So definitely still highlighting how they could get that 3rd year would be important in this one. Review criteria for SB 68 since there's a GED and more than 48 units at a CC. Yeah, so once again, that last year needed for the 3 years of equivalence. Let her know to expect non-resident tuition when she transfer or compete for 120 hours at adult school or non-credit for her. Yeah, these are all great responses. Thank you all.
One I would just add in terms of these, like advising her to stay at the community college, and also knowing that there's more than 48 units at the community college, just remembering that 2-year limit, right, for community colleges as the law stands now. So even if the student were to end up getting 60 units, they'd still only be able to use those 48 and would need to get that 1 year from an additional non-credit or high school or adult school program.
Yes. And then last one, Rodrigo, a 31-year-old student, is currently attending California adult school to pursue his GED. He wants to attend college. He is fascinated by business and would like to ultimately attain his BA in business admin. He comes to you and lets you know he heard undocumented students can attend college and there is a way to pay less. How would you inform him of his options? And he currently has 420 hours. I would encourage him to continue with his goals and ask him questions about his situation status and how long he's been attending college in California prior to any education. So that's definitely a good starting point to be able to see what else would be the next steps or options for him. So definitely talking to him about AB 540 and how he currently has 1 year. How would he be able to obtain those other 2 years? I would go back to the chart that explains the hours and understand the importance of AB 540 and explain to him how he needs a total of 3 years of the equivalent. And I think it got cut off, but I think that was the GED. So that would definitely be another option for them. I'd advise Rodrigo to stay at the adult school and work on the ESL classes while he gets sufficient hours for AB 540 and start at a community college for his transfer goals. Perfect. Yeah, so definitely once again, talking to him about the credits and the hours. I would recommend for Rodrigo to complete their GED and 840 hours to adult school and non-credit hours. So here that would be the 840 hours. He would still need those additional 1 year. That would be the 2 years for the adult school non-credit hours. So they would still need that 1 additional year. I would suggest he finish his GED and then he could apply for AB 540 at a community college or university. So getting his GED would definitely be one of the requirements. And then once again, informing him about the 3 years that he would need and how that could be done at the adult school, continuing it, or maybe the possibility of doing those other 2 years, or depending on how many hours he does, having that 3 years. So if he does decide to stay at the California adult school, obtaining the total hours, which would be 1,260 hours, or if he wants to do that combination of community college or adult school, looking at that chart and see how we can mix and match to make sure that they have the 3 hours. With 2 years at a community college, adult school, he would be eligible for AB 540 to pay in-state tuition and qualify for Cal grants. So for this one, if he does complete the 2 years at a community college, he would definitely be paying non-resident fees at the California Community College unless he does concurrent enrollment. Since he already has that 1 year, he would be eligible to apply for California Dream Act. And then depending on that, he might be eligible for Cal grants, but definitely exposing them to what that means. Depending on Rodrigo's arrival to the US, I would recommend him to stay in the adult school and maybe enroll in the early start program. I think this was what Esther was talking about, which would be no cost as long as he's enrolled in them at the same time. So we definitely discussed this one a little bit earlier. Can complete a combination of another 420 hours and 1 year at a community college. So that's definitely another option to be eligible for it, or 2 years of either to be eligible for AB 540. And he would, if 2 years at a community college, he would be, that would allow him to transfer. Yeah, great. Then Nancy, if you would like to add anything here.
Well, it's exciting to see people's engagement. Thank you so much to everybody for your answers for this. Thank you for kind of going through with us to sort of look at the different scenarios and see what might be possible. You know, and that was our hope today in terms of having this be really a learning lab, that we could learn from each other and think about what some of the these opportunities would be, or kind of like how this shows up in real life for everybody. So we're going to transition back in the last few minutes that we have to be able to think about equitable implementation. So there's one part which is actually just to be able to have the we have the law and we know what the law is, but how are we sure that different schools and that an individual at each school is actually implementing the law in the way that it was written? And so because of the, you know, like Immigrants Rising has been working for many years to try to create resources through the last 3 years and trainings through the last 3 years with the California Campus Catalyst Fund. You know, we've done a lot of creation of resources. We've done a lot of trainings for student service professionals, increase their knowledge, you know, help share some of that amazing knowledge that they had, and really tried to increase interdepartmental collaboration on some campuses. But despite all of that, eligible students are still being denied access. So in August of last year, I did an audit of the systemic information about AB 540. I looked at the affidavits and the legal advisory for the California community colleges, the affidavit and the FAQs for the CSU, and an affidavit for the University of California. And in looking at those different pieces, there were 4 key discrepancies that were, never mind like what the implemented policies are on the campus levels, but just looking at this written information, if you compared it with the law, there were 4 key discrepancies. One was the absence of important components that are in the bill that don't show up, such as like this could be used for graduate and undergraduate. This could be used like part-time. It could be the equivalent of full-time, right? You don't have to go to 1 year full-time. You could build that up over time, but some schools don't allow that. There's lack of information regarding specific policies that impact access. So, you know, information about students who are that already have a high school diploma, and also information around a high school diploma, and then also the need to clarify the status and the types of an expired visa, like we were talking about earlier, right? What is an out-of-state status visa versus an overstay of a visa, and how does that relate to different individuals? Also, some of that lack of information regarding specific policies is, what if you took you took your classes at a community college and then you went back and took some classes at adult school, like what is the order of the classes? How are those in order? So what we did was we actually tried to get an intersystemic work group with Immigrants Rising, but also the chancellor's offices, the UC office of the president, undocumented students and professionals, as well as admissions and Dreams Resource Center professionals, to be able to try to resolve some of these key discrepancies and to develop one statewide FAQ that would allow everyone to be able to get the same information no matter which school that they go to. We've started this work in December. We're in the midst of trying to develop the statewide FAQ, and our hope is that when we get that resolved, we'd be able to get an announcement from each system that they'd be willing to put out policy directives saying, like, we, the chancellor's office, believe that this is, we've agreed to this understanding of the law, that they would co-facilitate training so that there would be statewide trainings of all admissions and undocumented student personnel, as well as high school, CBOs and feeder schools, adult schools, non-credit schools, and that they would then update their websites and streamline their outreach materials with the same information. So we will keep you posted about these efforts, but we think that it's really important for everybody to know that we are working on a statewide level to try to be able to increase the number of students who actually can get eligibility through a law that has been in place for over 5 years now through SB 68 and 20 years for AB 540. So I think this is really important it's been really exciting to see the participation in this, and Maria actually is one of the participants from this work group. Maria, what would you add to this?
I think it's just great that these conversations are happening. And kind of like you mentioned, it's one thing how they're implemented and one thing just the discrepancies between them, but just having a overall process so that we can all be on the same page would just be amazing. So super thankful that these conversations are happening.
Yeah, and if you'd like more information about that, or you can definitely email me, Nancy at Immigrants Rising. We also did do a survey of undocumented student coordinators and admissions coordinators at the CSU, the UC, and the CCC. And we'll be releasing those results shortly to everyone to be able to kind of, so that actually they ended up mirroring a lot of the key discrepancies that we saw in the audit that we completed. So I just wanted to talk a little bit also about how this policy and practice kind of come together. So that, the AB 540 was passed and was updated. Then we started hearing individual stories and advocating. That was kind of how it was passed. Undertaking research, students and educators started to use that. More educational resources were created. And then at that point, then we started to do trainings with educators and students. From that, there was trainings with undocumented student resource centers, or DRCs. And then we started to do some trainings with admissions and financial aid to make sure that this word is really getting out. And then we did this audit of that I spoke about with the community colleges, the CSU and the UC. The 20-year anniversary came around, and that was a great point to actually say, like, hey, we need to make sure that this law that's been in place for 20 years continues to be equitably implemented. So that's where we came up with these key discrepancies. There's an intersystem work group like I'm talking about. And then that's now why we're talking about updates, not just to the way in which the practice is implemented in the schools, but also we are looking to try to do a legislative solution. So I'll shift that to Maria to speak about that.
Yeah, so we wanted to share SB 1141, and I'll definitely include all of those attachments here. But what SB 1141 would do is actually reduce the attendance requirements from AB 540 from 3 years to 2 years. So that would definitely create a more streamlined process for undocumented students. And additionally, it would remove the cap that California community colleges have for those 2 years. So there wouldn't be a cap in how many years and units they could receive at a California community college. Some of the benefits are in it is that it will save AB 540 eligible students time and money and open the door for higher education for a lot of our students. Even how we were addressing how those hours for adult school are just so many hours, like that would definitely reduce it as well. With SB 1141, it will correct unintended limitations of prior legislations that has left out some students and preventing them from getting AB 540 benefits. So we definitely talked about some of the challenges within this. So this bill would definitely correct some of those inequitable implementations of it. We do have some tools that were created by the California Community College Chancellor's Office, which are the fact sheets, talking points, and senators to contact. So the fact sheet will definitely kind of give you a better overview of what SB 1141 is doing. Some of the talking points, like if you do want to be able to talk to others about it, what does that mean? And very important, like what senators to contact. So there's this great, beautiful chart which says the name of the senators. It even has lists of the community colleges that they would be under for their district, and additionally UCs or CSUs as well. So we definitely encourage everybody who is here to take those with you so that we could definitely have this legislative solution of SB 1141 become a reality, because it would be a big life changer for a lot of the undocumented students.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Definitely really important. We will send these out with our follow-up email with the recording as well and other resources that were mentioned. We would ask you, please, before you go, to take a time to complete the short evaluation. We want to get feedback about the pace and the content of what we did today. Help us drill down on any remaining questions you have, because we all will be getting together next week at the same time, same place, and make sure that we're meeting your needs. So I put that into the chat, but please go ahead and complete this evaluation before you go. And then in our last few minutes together, we want to actually just let you know about what we'd love for you to do for the next session. So the next session will, as I said, will be at April 15th, 10 a.m. to 11:30. And we wish that before you come back next week that you can do one of these different activities. Use the website checklist for your admissions page. Actually, this one has the financial aid page, but there's actually a checklist specifically for admissions. So go ahead and use our website checklist for your admissions page, or review your school's outreach materials. What are they saying about AB 540 and SB 68? Is the accurate information on there? Another option would be go and chat up your outreach and ambassador program and find out, like, how are they thinking about AB 540 and SB 68? Figure out a fourth option would be like identify who processes the AB 540 at your schools, or if you're at a community-based organization or other organization at the top feeder schools that you're sending people to, like who processes those AB 540s, and or introduce yourself to the residency officer at your school. We would really love for you to pick one of these 4 options. And then you can report back about this next week. I think for me, we did an audit of websites a year or 2 ago, and it was surprising to see how many still had the old affidavit or only mentioned the 3 years of high school. So we really want to make sure that all of you are activated, not just to know about this to yourself, but figure out what's going on an institutional level where you are, so that we can then put ourselves into action to make sure that this information is more available. Maria, can you put the link to the list of senators to contact, please, in the chat? Yes. And we will be sending those out in the follow-up email that we have as well. But we want to thank you so much for your time. Please go ahead and fill out that evaluation if you want. If you haven't yet, we want to make sure that we're on point for next week. And then this is my contact information and Maria's contact information. And if you have any specific questions you wanted to send us directly, we certainly appreciate that. We will just thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for all of what you're up to in terms of supporting undocumented students and making sure that AB 540 and SB 68 options are available for the people that we serve. Maria, I'll give the last word to you.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing this space. Please complete that evaluation. It would also help us so that we can know what topics to focus on for the next week's session. But yeah, just super appreciative that we have this virtual space to share with each other.
Hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much, everybody. Be well.